Hi, I'm Patrick Ledden, and I want to welcome you to this week's episode of Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversations, where we sit down with senior leaders to talk about strategy, growth, and leadership in real time. Today, I'm joined by Aneri Jambusaria, Head of Wealth Management at LPL Financial, the largest independent broker-dealer in the United States. Aneri brings deep experience leading through complexity, balancing innovation, scale, and trust in what we all know is a very fast-changing industry. Aneri, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
I'm thrilled to have you. Thank you so much again for being here. Let's start with your story. What experiences, if you were to say, if we were just chatting over a cup of coffee, what would you tell me are some of the experiences that shaped your leadership style and have really evolved even in the role you have today at LPL?
Yeah, well, Patrick, I know you like to talk about career paths on the show, and I got to tell you, my career path was not at all a straight one into wealth management. But it did start really early in my life. I just didn't know it. So when I was a kid, my parents made what turned out to be a bad investment decision. And they unfortunately lost all of our life savings in the process. And, at the time, they are first generation immigrants from India. They didn't really know our financial system or understand how it works. And unfortunately, that they listened to somebody who was a member of our tight-knit Indian community. And that was probably someone who they shouldn't have been taking advice from, who didn't have their best interests in mind. And it's a story, I know we hear about stories like this all the time. When it happened to us, of course, it was a really big thing in our family. And even as a kid, I was 7 or 8 when this happened. I just couldn't shake the feeling that it was preventable, that this didn't need to happen. And it wasn't until, of course, later in life when I started working in financial services that I realized that it was, in fact, preventable. And, there is this quote unquote cheat code for financial security in America. It's called financial planning. The challenge is just not enough people have access to quality, personalized financial advice. And so that ended up becoming my why for why I do what I do and my purpose for being in wealth management. I really want to live in a world where there's more Americans who have access to quality advice and who are able to, live out their dream just like how my parents wanted to do.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I can imagine at a young age how that would shape you. And I also would imagine that even today in your senior role, when you think about the people that your firm works with, you're kind of seeing their families through your own lens of life, I guess.
Absolutely. And, that's a really interesting thing about wealth management. When you hear the term, historically, it's always meant, managing the wealth of the, high net worth, ultra high net worth type individuals. And of course, those are certainly individuals who we serve. But increasingly, wealth management, it's at all levels of the wealth spectrum, right? Increasingly, each of us is responsible for our own financial security, no matter how much money you make, right? And so it's up to us to have an understanding of what our goals are and to be saving and investing in a responsible way to be able to achieve their goals. And I'm really proud to be able to work with a firm that today is responsible for partnering with over 7 million Americans on achieving their kind of financial goals. It's a huge undertaking and a huge responsibility that I don't take for granted a single day.
Well, it's funny from my own perspective. For a long time, it was just put away a little bit every month and out of my paycheck and let it grow over the course of time. But as I've watched my own parents age, all of a sudden I start to realize I'm the next one in the door. I'm the next one to go as far as looking toward retirement someday down the road. And in doing it, it really makes me think on a personal level, and many people probably relate to this, that they want somebody who can advise them that they trust, somebody who is leaning into the opportunities, but at the same time, not taking unnecessary risks. So you're kind of thinking about, you work in a world where confidence is currency, where people have to be confident in the choices you're making. And what have you learned about kind of the intersection of finance, technology these days, and trust?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that word trust is first and foremost, right? You see it time and time again. People will make, generally responsible financial decisions until times get tough, whether it's the markets get choppy or something crazy happens in your personal life. Then all of a sudden there's this initial reaction to do something that might not be in the best interest of your long-term goals. And that's really where having the advice of a trusted financial professional can really make a difference in those moments. And that's what separates out the people who actually achieve their goals to those that are maybe kind of still striving. And so, we view that element of trust as super important. I'm glad you brought up technology and, of course, AI. You can't have a conversation in business today without talking about AI. And I personally believe AI is going to be transformational in wealth management, just like how it is in pretty much every other sphere that we operate in. But at the end of the day, when it comes to those really difficult times as consumers, we're going to want a person who we trust, who knows our family, who knows our situation, who can help hold our hand and get us through the tough times. And I believe there's always going to be a role for an individual to do that. They're just going to be supercharged and even more effective with the benefit of technology by their side.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot more opportunity than fear to be found. And even though technology can be a little, especially if you feel like it's threatening your job or whatever it might be. I mean, we all have to figure out how to deal in the ever evolving landscape as far as that goes. Which makes me think about, we talked a little bit about trust and your customers or those that you partner with in the world, but then you have your own team members and they're dealing with many of the same issues, right? They're dealing with innovation and change and the financial world and technology. So how do you, in your role as a senior leader, both think about not just your end customer or clients you serve, but also your team members who oftentimes interact every day with those clients?
Of course. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I think the way that we at LPL think about our team, it's kind of like an inverted pyramid is a visual that we use. We've got our clients, of course, at the very top. And for us, of course, those are all of the 30,000 financial advisors and 1,200 institutions, including credit unions and insurance companies that we partner with to enable the success of their wealth businesses. But then right below that are our employees, right? They're the ones that are engaging firsthand with our clients on a day-to-day basis. And then you work your way down the pyramid and you get to kind of, managers and executive leadership. And then all the way towards the bottom, that's kind of where I sit, right? And, we think for us to be a really successful company in the future, we need to operate this way. And of course, prioritize not just the client experience, but also the employee experience as well. That's actually been a really big focus of ours at LPL. We're making really big investments to enable our employees to be successful. And the first step, from a wealth management perspective, we think it's really important for our employees, in order to serve financial professionals, we need to be financial professionals ourselves. And so we're continuing to invest in the development and skill building of our employees so that they can have the acumen, the expertise, and the perspective of a financial professional to really be a great thought partner to our clients. So that's kind of the focus area that we have, and kind of bringing it back to the world of technology. If we're able to do that with our team, and from my perspective, the possibilities are boundless in terms of how we can better enable our clients to kind of operate in this dynamic and ever-changing environment.
Many organizations, when I talk to senior executives, they'll talk about the importance of their employees, but then, and they also talk in developing them and growing them, but they also talk about the business needs to be developed and grown. And I'm just curious, do you ever find that there's some tension between the two? Like, I want to develop my people, but we also still are trying to develop a business. Have you figured out how to make sure you're developing people that drive the business?
Yeah, I think for us, part of it has been a learning journey and figuring out what are the most important areas to invest in our employees, right? And I think like all companies, we haven't always gotten it right. I think we've gotten better and better over time at figuring out what are the areas where we can make investments in the employee experience that also drive business outcomes. At the same time, though, Patrick, there's going to be things that we invest in that don't have a direct relationship to business outcomes. So we've got 5 core values at our firm. One of them is create and share joy. And that's something that is just, it's inherent, right? You feel it, you know it whenever you're experiencing joy. And that is a priority for us. It's something we're always going to do for our employees and our clients, because we believe that long term is going to create the kind of environment that our team wants to be a part of and that our clients also want to participate in as well.
All right, so that one caught me a bit off guard. So I don't know. I haven't done a lot of homework as far as looking at other financial firms and their what their values are organizationally. But the word joy kind of caught me when you said that, because I was like, I didn't expect to necessarily see that, and I could even see some potential clients going, "Oh, I don't care if you're having joy, just make me money." But why joy, and how did that is it always been there? Is it something that recently was added, and how does it kind of show up every day?
Yeah. So, we have a new CEO as of October of last year. And in conjunction with him taking over leadership of the firm, we refreshed our values. And this is actually one of our newer values. So it's one that hasn't always been at the front of the table.
Yeah, and I love it. I'm not challenging it. I'm just curious
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
And I will say it stemmed first and foremost from us as a leadership team realizing a big part of what we love about our jobs is the fact that we have fun, right? Is the fact that we have joy every day in just, the problem solving and getting to engage with our clients and our teams. And there's something that's really intrinsically satisfying for us. And yes, sometimes it involves being silly with one another as well. That's part of what makes our jobs fun. We started to talk to our clients about it. And part of what we found there is that so many of our clients take joy really seriously as well. So one thing as context about our business model, we're of course one of the largest wealth management firms in the industry. We manage 1.8 trillion in assets, helping over 7 million Americans. But we've got a different model than the big Wall Street firms, right? We operate through independent advisors and generally more mid-sized institutions. Think about the credit union in your local community type place. And those are the types of organizations where they love being a part of their community. They love participating in what makes it special. And yes, that means that they also take joy really, really seriously as well. And so that's something that we've adopted as part of our identity. It's been about 6 months since we've been living into creating and sharing joy. And I'll just share personally, it's definitely made my job more fun. I think it's made our team's jobs more fun. And I think our clients are benefiting from it as well.
So I have a book coming out in a couple months with James Patterson, who's a very well-known author. And in the process of writing the book, I was always, it's just how I'm wired. I'm always like, oh, well, then what's the next thing we got to do? What's the next thing? What's the next thing type of person. And I have to watch that and check myself. And one day he said to me, Patrick, are you going to drink from a cup of joy or a cup of grief? It's your choice. Which one are you going to drink from all the time? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's such a punch in the truth button. But the idea of like, just grab that cup of joy every day. So from your personal perspective, when you think about the type of clients you serve, it sounds in many cases, like you said, like it's got the credit union vibe or the community bank vibe to it in regards to like building a relationship. Why or how is that important to you that that's the type of customer you serve as opposed to everybody's just a number of an account and you don't have any idea who that is?
Yeah, 100%. So for me, it stems from, earlier in my career in wealth management, I became a certified financial planner. And it was one of the most, informative experiences that I've had because it really gave me an appreciation of what great advice looks like. I've seen the magic of what happens when an advisor can have a really deep planning conversation with a client and use the best of capabilities out there to bring their dreams to life, right? And so having seen that, it became really important for me in my career to enable that in the fullest way possible. There's about 300,000 advisors in the United States. Most of them are affiliated with, again, these large institutions, the large Wall Street firms. And when you talk to them, you can hear in their voice like they feel torn because on one hand, they know what's possible and they know in their heart the type of advice that they want to deliver for clients. But the reality is that they're part of their, one cog in a wheel, right? Of a larger firm that, I have some other objectives in mind. And that's part of why, for me, I joined LPL about 5 years ago because I really wanted to understand and be a part of the story around independent advice because I truly believe that it delivers the best outcomes for consumers. To have someone who is a truly independent advisor who's thinking just about you, someone who's running an independent wealth business, we think is really important. And then, independence historically, though, it has been kind of a go it at yourself proposition, right? It's not a new idea. LPL's been around for 37 years. But to be an independent advisor historically was a lot of work. You had to figure a lot of stuff out yourself. You didn't always have all the best capabilities and tools. And we set out to change that. So about 10 years ago, you started to see LPL making really significant investments to have the best of the best wealth management capabilities on par with all of those Wall Street firms. And so fast forward to today, we live in a world where we serve independent advisors, again, 30,000 of them, financial institutions, 1,200 financial institutions. We're one of the largest firms in wealth management. But we do it in a different way than all of the other firms that are large in wealth management. We do it in more of a B2B2C model where advisors and institutions are our clients, of course, ultimately serving the livelihood of those 7 million Americans. And if you're a consumer and you happen to be working with an LPL advisor, well, gosh, you've got the best of both worlds because you've got an independent advisor who really knows you and can deliver what's best for you. But then on the flip side, you are backed by a Fortune 400 company that has the best of the best capabilities to use at their disposal to really help you achieve financial security. And it's a combination of those two that we see has been really a winning formula. It's why we are the fastest growing firm amongst those largest firms in wealth management. We grew at 10% organic growth in 24, 14% in the last 12 months. It's because consumers and advisors see that this is a better way of delivering and receiving financial advice.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, you're talking about the relationship between the advisors, the B2B side of it, as well as the consumers, the B2C side of it. It made me think a little bit about, and maybe this taps into you saying earlier on as a financial planner yourself, is that when people are listening to the podcast right now, some of them might be stepping into their first leadership role. And they're listening right now because they're kind of curious about what do senior leaders think? What have they learned over the course of their career? How might I be able to leverage some of those insights myself so I don't bang my knee on that coffee table or whatever it might be and learn something? And then there's other people in different roles, whatever it might be. But one thing I've noticed when I work with clients myself is that sometimes when you move into that first leadership role, you think like what motivated me as an individual contributor is going to motivate everybody, or what motivates a customer to make a purchasing decision is going to be the same thing for everybody. Like what would motivate me? But I would imagine that you have some real great thoughts around this because you've talked to your customers, you've talked to the advisors you work with, and you probably have realized by listening to them, everybody wants something maybe a little bit different or unique to them.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think in some cases, and again, I'd say pretty much across the board, you see that amongst financial advisors and institutions, achieving great outcomes amongst their end clients is paramount, right? This kind of table stakes is that they want to be able to enable the best possible outcomes for their clients. So that means investment alpha, really being able to deliver that in spades, having the best trade execution, having really great tax and estate planning so you can serve a client holistically across all of their needs, right? That's, of course, really important. But then there's another part of it as well, which is that, advisors, they want to have a great livelihood, right? They want to be rewarded for their contributions. And, to your point, like not everyone values everything the same way, but I think pretty much across the board, advisors feel like they want to do the right thing for their clients and they want to be rewarded for it in a way that's commensurate with their efforts. And again, I know, Patrick, I can tell from reading a little bit about you, you're interested in the concept of disruption and, disruption within industries. I'd say wealth management is an industry that just didn't have a lot of disruption for a long time, right? It operated in the same way with the same Wall Street firms for a long time, not really for any good reason, but just because that's the way that things had always been done. And it took, really understanding advisors and what they were solving for us to realize like, hey, there actually could be a better way out there. And that's being able to pair these industry leading capabilities to drive the outcomes of their clients, but then also making sure that they have skin in the game and are rewarded and can kind of grow the value of their own independent businesses at the same time.
So earlier you talked about this inverted pyramid and the idea that your customers are at the top of the pyramid and you kind of work your way down and you're kind of toward the bottom of the pyramid, which to me, when I think about that, I love the focus and where you're putting the attention. But I also think, boy, that's a lot of weight on your shoulders, figuratively and probably, figuratively, I guess. But I mean, what do you do? Because one thing I find is sometimes senior leaders, you get burned out. I mean, what do you do to make sure you don't feel an exorbitant or extra amount of that weight on your shoulders? Or how do you at least kind of hang in there sometimes?
Yeah, well, so it's actually a very well-timed question, Patrick. I just came back from vacation. I was out last week, and I'm personally a huge advocate of being able to take some time away from our day-to-day routines. And it's funny, like vacations, I think, take different meanings and orientations to everyone, right? For some people, it's like, gosh, I need to like disconnect from my email and sit on the beach for a week, right? For me, it's probably a little bit different. I was sharing with some of your colleagues earlier. I hosted my nieces and nephew, they're 10, 10, and 13 for the last week. And we did the stuff that kids do in Southern California. We went to theme parks and I spent the week, making them burgers and fries and being an aunt. And for me, having a change in perspective, even if it is just for a few days or a week at a time, is a huge reset button for me. Just to be able to your point, like kind of get away, kind of not feel the weight as heavily. Think about your day to day in a different way. I think is really important, and that's part of why I think it's so important for people to take vacation. I know it sounds silly, but you have your vacation for a reason. It's actually because it makes you a better professional, in my opinion. I certainly feel that way for me. I always feel, and again, for me, it's less about like relaxing or going to some like exotic location, just about having a change of perspective, even for a short period of time.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that because sometimes it gets back to like people are unique. So what is it that kind of refills you? And sometimes people are like, I have to completely unplug from work for 2 weeks or a week or whatever it is, and if I don't do that, I'll never, I can't recharge. Other people like if I can at least do a pulse check on my email, I'll be so anxious I
I'll do
won't enjoy
better.
my vacation. Yeah, it's kind
Yes.
of interesting how that works. Yeah,
That's so
and
true. That's so true. And
yeah.
I'm more of the latter, full disclosure, right? It makes me feel better just to know that like I'm on top of everything. But yeah, to your point, like everyone's different in terms of what it takes for you to hit the reset button. I just think it's important to make that a priority.
So let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to that 7-year-old, 8-year-old girl who experienced what her family dealt with based on that bad advice. If you could go back and talk to that younger self, or maybe her a little bit later in life, what would some leadership advice you might give her?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I guess I'll first just start with like trust your instincts. As I mentioned, like I just felt in my bones at the time, like, gosh, like this was preventable. This didn't need to happen. But I didn't really have confidence in myself to really ask those questions or to challenge those around me. I just kind of accepted it as like this is just something that happened. I think in hindsight, I would encourage her to trust her instincts, ask questions, learn more about it, and just take matters into your own hands. The good news, I will say, my dad in particular, he's someone who really took this experience to heart. And he applied himself in really learning the US financial system after this whole situation happened and unfolded. And he is a self taught investor. He's actually the person that I now go to for advice or for perspective now. So for me, also witnessing his journey was proof that, you don't have to let a setback define you. You can actually turn a setback into a strength and a success. You just need to invest the time and energy into it to turn the narrative.
Yeah, you mentioned that I'm into disruption, and I definitely am. Not necessarily like I'm not a tech, I'm not a futurist or anything like that. I'm a behavioralist, but I think about how people handle disruptions that get sent to them in life, or they loft upon themselves sometimes. And what do you think it is about your father that when that curveball was thrown at him, that maybe the blinders came off and he realized the advice was bad, or the numbers all of a sudden went completely south? That's a very disruptive thing, and many people would not have been able to move in a positive direction from there. What do you think is
Yeah.
about your dad that you saw him do that we can learn from?
Yeah. You know, I think deep down inside, he probably felt the way that I did in that he also didn't trust his gut on this. My parents are very responsible people. They don't make irrational or irresponsible decisions. So I think he also probably felt in his gut that this wasn't true to him and that he should listen to himself more. And I think he also just felt this desire and drive to be successful in this country. His dad had sacrificed a lot for him to live in the United States, and he really wanted to demonstrate that he could be successful in this country. And he just said, okay, if this is what it takes to be successful in this country is to learn how to invest and to learn how to manage money, then I'm going to figure that out. So I'm really proud of him for having that wherewithal and that chutzpah to figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely. You should be. That's pretty amazing because a lot of people would fold their cards or go or start to shrink in that moment. But as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm going to figure this out, and if this is what it takes, I've got to be the person who does that. I think that's really cool. What do you think? Is it just from his example that's helped you realize, hey, I need to speak up and say it when I think it, or trust my gut, or has there been other experiences in your life that have kind of gone either way, where you didn't do it and you're like, I should have been the one who said it, or where you did do it and you're like, high five yourself in the mirror because you went ahead and did it?
Oh, plenty. Well, I would say, Patrick, like in my career, I've had a ton of development over time, right? This is one of the areas that I consistently challenge myself on is like, are you speaking up enough? Are you sharing your perspective enough? And it continues to be something that I work on. I will say probably the most notable experience like that happened probably like midway through my career, around when I was going from being more of a mid-level leader to more of a seasoned executive. And I was working with the president of a business unit. And I remember coming to him one day, we were talking about a board presentation that he had to do. And I asked him, I said, hey, so, what do you want to talk about in this board presentation? And he turned the tables on me and he said, well, what do you think I should talk about? Mm. And Patrick, I was stunned. I hadn't like thought it through. I had some ideas. I didn't know if they were good ideas, right? But the next day I went back into his office, having thought it through, and I shared my perspective. And that was one of the first times that I started to see myself in the shoes of a senior executive, right? What would it be like to be in front of a board? What are the most important issues facing this business? How would I describe some of the challenges that we're facing? And over time, as I started to speak up more and put myself in those shoes more and more, it made that future more of a possibility for myself.
So if I'm listening to the podcast right now and I'm saying, I've done that myself. I have done that myself where I'm like, I walked out of the room and I'm like, I should have said it, or I should have not, or I should have gone back in the room the next day, or whatever it might be. If there's somebody listening to the podcast right now who are saying like, I knew I should have said something, or my gut told me something, or the other person said it and I was like, I was already thinking that. What piece of advice would you give somebody to be willing to kind of trust their instincts a little bit?
Say, it's never too late to speak up. It's never too late. And I'll share a couple of examples, right? So there's mine of like, I thought about it overnight and I walked in the next morning, first thing, while everyone was kind of getting ready, getting situated for the day. I did a drive-by. You can always do a drive-by later. I worked with someone who wasn't always as comfortable speaking up in meetings, but was excellent at sending follow-up emails after the meeting, sharing their perspective. So there's all different ways that you can contribute and communicate, and just know that it's never too late.
I love that. I love that. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. I love the insights. I love the perspective about joy, and and also the willingness to kind of trust your instinct and find a way to speak up and give yourself a little bit of grace. If you didn't do it that day, there's still some time to make it happen. I think that's so true. Thanks so much for joining us today, Aneri. It's really been a great conversation.
Thanks, Patrick.
Well, folks, thanks so much for listening to the conversation. I hope this sparked some ideas for you about how you can lead more intentionally in your work and in your life. And if today's episode was beneficial to you, please share it with someone else. And thank you again so much for joining Franklin Covey's C-Suite Conversations. My name is Dr. Patrick Ledden. Now go make it a great day.